military chaplains, caring and compassionate, no matter what country they serve, supporting and advising military members and their families.
The nature of our work as chaplains touches almost all areas of life.
But imagine removing chaplains who identify as Catholic, Mormon, Muslim, to name a few, because their beliefs do not align with a progressive agenda. In Canada, that is exactly what could happen.
This is just one of the many recommendations a government panel made to the Canadian Armed Forces late last month. In an effort to tackle all forms of discrimination, the Minister of National Defense Advisory Panel stated that redefining chaplaincy would contribute to a more inclusive culture.
It put its finger on things such as, non-ordination of women to the priesthood as a source of discrimination, are not celebrating marriages for same-sex couples as another form of discrimination. It mentioned, the history of Indigenous peoples and their sufferings, and seemed to imply that our presence, it's, Catholics and other Christians, that our presence would somehow make that worse.
Bishop Scott McCaig, who heads the Roman Catholic Military Ordinariate of Canada, issued an official response to the report, saying that all Catholic chaplains are committed to inclusive, non-judgmental, and universal care of service members. Bishop Scott says if this recommendation is implemented, there would be a drastic change in the Royal Canadian Chaplain Service. According to the service, there are 192 regular force chaplains and 145 reserve force chaplains representing the Christian, Muslim, and Jewish faiths.
It would mean the exclusion of the majority of faith groups presently represented in the chaplaincy of the Canadian Armed Forces. In fact, it would narrow the spiritual support to a very small, select group of religious faiths and denominations. They saw Catholicism as being a threat to diversity and to inclusion, et cetera, because they really misunderstood who we are and what we're about.
Ray Pennings is the co-founder and vice president of Cardis, a faith-based, nonpartisan think tank in Ontario. He says the recommendation to prohibit certain faith groups has legal implications and violates religious freedom. In a letter to the Minister of National Defense, Cardis states the report prepared by the panel demonstrates thinly veiled hostility to a number of Abrahamic religions, including adherents of Islam, Judaism, Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, and Protestantism, and shows gross ignorance of such faiths.
Basically, what this says is that even if a chaplain, him or herself, was totally progressive in all of their points of view, simply being sponsored by or belonging to, for example, the Roman Catholic Church or a Protestant church that has that, should disqualify them from being involved in chaplaincy in the military.
To give a perspective from the States, Archbishop Timothy Broglio, leader of the Archdiocese for the Military Services USA, says that prohibiting chaplains in certain faith groups that do not align with progressive agendas would be detrimental.
I think if you're talking about a more inclusive society, the thing that comes out of this report is the exclusion of certain beliefs and therefore of certain people. How is that more inclusive? To me, it's more exclusive.
Archbishop Broglio says that Catholics currently make up about 20% of the U.S. military, but only 8% of military chaplains. Removing chaplains, he says, would be a disservice to military members and their families. This entire report and the creation of the advisory panel comes after several high-ranking officials in the Canadian military have been accused of misconduct in recent years. Both Bishop Scott and Ray Pennings acknowledge that there is a culture of discrimination that needs to be addressed, but both agree that limiting chaplaincy isn't the solution. And in a separate review, there have been complaints from female, LGBTQ2+, and non-Christian chaplains about biases, and that some LGBTQ2+ chaplains have not felt supported. In response to these concerns, the National Defense's advisory panel emphasized the need for a thorough review of the chaplaincy to ensure all chaplains are open-minded and accepting of all service members. The report, along with all the recommendations, now heads to the Minister of National Defense, who says she is committed to building institutions where Canadians from all backgrounds are included, welcomed, and empowered.
The panel urges the defense team leaders to consider these recommendations with resolve and with urgency, and that is exactly what we will do.
Roselle Reyes, EWTN News in Depth.